This is a topic that most of our listeners are going to be super interested in because the metaverse, virtual reality, that could well be the future. In fact, you say it's our next reality.
It's actually very timely given all that's happening the last year with AI, and then this last few months with VR and AR and everything. It's all top of mind. The topics that we're going to be discussing today.
I'm Misha Da Vinci. This is the Grift Podcast, conversations to get you ready for the future. What is the metaverse? Is it really a thing? Are we all going to be living and working in 3D digital worlds? Will we just lay around with headsets on and lose touch with reality? Is Ready Player One the actual future? Or is the metaverse just some stupid idea cooked up by the tech bros that will never ever happen? My guest today is going to answer all of your burning questions and more. So let's dive in and get ready for the future. Okay, so let me introduce you to the audience so they understand who you are. Alvin Wang Graylin is a technology pioneer, entrepreneur, executive, and thought leader with 30 plus years of experience delivering innovative products in the AI, XR, and semiconductor industries. He's the co-author of the new book, Our Next Reality: How the AI-Powered Metaverse Will Reshape the World. Having built his foundation in VR research at the Human Interface Technology Lab over 30 years ago, Alvin has also developed his expertise in AI and natural language processing after extensive studies at the University of Washington and MIT. In his recent professional journey, he served as the China president of HTC from 2016 to 2023 and continues to contribute as Global VP of Corporate Development at HTC, which is a global leader in the VR AR space. His broad operational experience also includes global P&L roles at multinational corporations like Intel, Trend Micro, WatchGuard Technologies, and IBM. Alvin holds an MS in computer science from MIT, where he specialized in AI, and an MS in business from MIT's Sloan School of Management on the entrepreneurship and operations track. He also earned a BS in electrical engineering from the University of Washington, focused on VR, AI, and CPU architecture. He was born in China during the Cultural Revolution and emigrated to the US in 1980 as the country's reform period started. He's recently relocated back to the US after almost 20 years living in China during its internet mobile boom, and is currently based in Seattle, Washington. What a journey, Alvin. How did you tell us how you became you? Like the Alvin you are today, born in China, first 9 years there.
It probably goes back a little bit even before me, because my parents probably have even a more interesting story than me, particularly my mom, who is half Scottish American and half Chinese. And her mom was a reporter for the New York Tribune who came to China during the Sino-Japanese War
Shut up.
to report on the war, and had her, but then had to escape from China as the Japanese invaded Shanghai. And so she left, or my grandmother left my mom in China during that period and had to escape. And she was wrapped in gauze and had to be pretending to be a leopard so that the Japanese guards wouldn't touch her when they went through the checkpoints. So the fact that that all happened and they survived, and because she was able to grow up in China, and she was able to meet my dad. And she is a ballerina, so she was a ballerina for the Beijing Ballet Troupe, and then later started the Guangzhou and Shanghai ballet schools. And my dad was a professor of arts at the Guangzhou Academy of Fine Arts. So they're both artists, one in performing and one in more art history and painting and calligraphy. But then because of their art background, during the Cultural Revolution, they were both sent to re-education camp, which is where I was born, actually.
Whoa.
So my first few years was actually living on a tea farm in what was a renovated chicken shed.
Whoa.
And in fact, the funny thing is we might not have even had that issue, and except my mom was a little bit rambunctious. Her ballet school was being shut down by Mao Zedong's wife, and so she wrote a letter to her saying, "Please don't shut down my ballet school. Arts and culture is so important." And a week later, she got notified and said, "Hey, you need to be reeducated. So go to the farm immediately." So it was I guess her love for the arts that kind of set that thing all in motion. But
Wow.
luckily, 9 years later, she was able to contact the consulate at the U.S. Embassy, who then found her mom's brother, who was living in Seattle, and was able to help communicate and create that connection. And he sponsored us to come to the U.S. in 1980. So it's a bit of a long answer to your question of
This is a
how
movie.
I started.
This is a movie. It has to be. What a beautiful story. How did your mom, she's half Chinese.
Yeah,
How did she,
yeah.
was that a negative for her growing up? I mean, how did she handle it?
Yeah, I mean, because she was very visibly not fully Chinese,
Exactly.
right? So, and I'm only a quarter, and a lot of people get me mixed up, and they think I'm different ethnic origins. So, um, and particularly during the Cultural Revolution, where Western thought was definitely shunned. So, she probably suffered quite a bit during that period. And this could go on a
Yeah,
long
yeah,
time,
yeah,
but it's
yeah.
but I mean, so she was able to get us over to China, or to the US. And pretty much when we landed, my father said, hey, to my brother and I said, hey, we sacrificed a lot to get you guys over here to the US so that you can get a Western education, and be in a more free society. So make sure you take advantage of it, and really try to go to a good school, and try to contribute to society, right? And that's kind of been my personal mission since I was 9.
How how
And
how is this
mhm.
story? So you have this deep understanding, and then of course recently you've been back to China working there for a long
Yes.
time. You work for a Taiwanese company, which is that's a whole other conversation we could go into. But clearly you
Yes.
know a lot that maybe the rest of us don't. You understand things that maybe that many other people do not understand because you lived on both sides of this geopolitical divide, so to speak. How has that informed your journey here and what you prioritize in life? Like, why? How has all of this shaped you and what you see as valuable and significant, important, or has it not?
It has a lot, and particularly I think, and also I don't know if I mentioned, but I'm also a quarter Ashkenazi Jew because of my grandmother's heritage. And so I definitely have a foot in a lot of different camps,
Mm.
and because of that, it I think takes away some of the natural bias that people would have because they grew up in one particular region, or one particular nation, or one particular race, and they feel there's a particular one that's right or wrong, right?
Mm.
And I think that the problem today is, no matter where you are, um, the politicians and this culture creates an us and them. It puts everybody in the in group as the good guys, and everybody else as bad guys. And I understand why that happens, because that's a way for governments and for society and for cultures to bond each other together.
To control people. It's a great
Yeah,
tactic.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a tool for manipulation for thousands of
Yeah.
years. Um, but the fact that I've got these foots in different places, and I have friends in all of these different places, um, I hear everybody's perspective,
Right.
and there's truth in everybody's perspective,
Mm.
right? I think that's something that a lot of people don't want to admit, is that they think that, oh, we have the right truth,
The
and
whole
everybody
truth.
else's,
We have the whole truth.
yeah,
Yeah.
and they're being manipulated, or their propaganda is influencing them. They're being brainwashed, and the reality is that there are no good guys and bad guys. There is
Mm.
only us and them, and no matter, depends on which perspective you are. Their truth is right for them, right? And I think that's something that changes a lot in terms of how I view things and how I listen to things, and I try to, and that gives me more balance, right? Because it takes away the bias, and it allows you to also step in the foot of the other person, which is very difficult for most people to do.
And which I think, curiously, um, VR is going to help us do incredible things in that arena.
I can't agree more. In fact, I had my team do a study on this during the pandemic,
Mm.
and when people were locked in, and there was more kind of the deglobalization that was happening. What we found was that when you make people go into a VR experience and they travel to another country, they actually become 70% more interested to actually physically go to those places.
Mm,
And they were twice as more appreciative of this new culture.
mm,
The problem, in particular in America, only 10% of Americans ever leave the country, or if you can't count Canada as a potential other country, is so much like America.
yeah.
And so we did this study that actually got a bunch of people into VR and showed them virtual experiences in 3D videos and 360 videos of other countries. And what we found was that the people who went into these, they were 70% more likely to go to this other country than the ones that just watched it on video,
Right.
watched it on a 2D screen. And they were twice as interested in learning more about the culture of this other place than the people who only watched it on video. So, a lot of us consume our content on 2D video, and it doesn't bring you that closeness that you can get when you're immersed.
Immersive.
Right. So
So,
people talk about VR as the empathy machine, and there's definitely
mm,
a lot of truth in that. And I think it's a great way also to create connections between people that wouldn't have happened. And particularly now with AI and instant translation, we can actually break the language barrier
mm.
that often happens. So if you can bring people to an immersive experience and have real time conversations with people in a language that you can understand, then I think that those stats that I just gave would probably double or triple.
We're talking
So
about technology, and I'm really going to go into that in depth in more in a minute. But so we're really looking at technology that can transform the human experience to the point where we have whole new possibilities of connecting with others in a much deeper way. And we know humans are about connection. Humans are about
yes,
communication, relationships. I mean, really enhance the human experience exponentially. And that's the exciting thing about it, which we're going to get into. Let's not go there because I know once I give you a chance to go, you're just going to take off. Before we get there, before we
yeah,
get
I
there,
think we're
okay,
gonna need more than 1 hour.
we can go a little longer if you have a little extra time. Okay, so before we get there,
Sure.
one more thing. When you get up in the morning, Alvin, what drives
Yes.
you? What moves you forward through the day? What excites you about your work? What are you looking forward to?
Honestly, it all goes back to that conversation I talked about earlier with my father, because he pretty much said that everybody on this planet has a purpose, and their purpose is to contribute the most possible to society in the time that they're here,
Yes.
and to do it with the skills that they have.
Yes.
And he's like,
Yes.
your mom and I are artists. All we can do is to bring beauty and knowledge to the world. But what you guys have may be different. And he said, you're probably not as artistically inclined, so you should find something else that you're more suited for. And so my brother and I both went into engineering, and then we both went into business, and then we both became entrepreneurs and executives.
Mm,
So I think we're taking more the technology path,
yeah.
and I think technology is a lever
Yeah.
that allows us to do more than we could with our physical bodies and our limited capacities. So the fact that we're living in such an amazing time where technology is advancing at such a great pace, more so than any time in the past,
Hmm.
and so it excites me every day to wake up and see what new technologies have developed, and how that technology can be leveraged to for me to contribute more. In fact, one of the reasons I wrote the book was because I see that we are at a important inflection point in our society. And if the technologies that are coming out are not used properly, they could go very, very badly. But if it's used well and we manage it well in the next 5 to 10 years, we could have a abundant society that could last for millions of years. Right. So we are at a real juncture, and most people, particularly people in positions of power, probably are not aware of where things are, and how precarious things could be if we don't make the right decisions. So I wrote this book, and together with my co-partner or co-author Lewis, because we wanted to give a balanced view of where the world is headed, so that people can make up their own minds, and they see both sides of the picture. And as you know, most books that comes out, or most articles, it's bias in one way,
Yeah.
whether it's super positive or it's super doomer.
Yeah.
And I know that when you scare people, you get their attention, but you have to balance it with a positive end, so you give them hope,
Yeah.
and the two together will give the motivation for people to take action,
Yeah.
versus just selling books or getting more clicks.
My next question was, why did you write the book? Okay, so you answered that already. Before we dive into what the metaverse is and these new immersive realities and what that all means for humans, just quickly, what do you do at HTC? I mean, what's the company building? I want to get just a little window into that.
Sure, sure. So, we used to be well, actually, we used to be the number one smartphone manufacturer in the world. So, in 2011, 2012, we were bigger than Samsung, bigger than Apple, right? So and we made actually the first smartphones that for HCF for Windows phones, and then we made the first Android phones. And so the first dual camera phones, and the first adjustable for the first 3G and 4G phones were also made by HTC. So a lot of innovation on the telecom side.
Mm,
But for the last 8 years or so, we've been really innovating on the VR and AR side.
mm,
So we were the first to come out with full scale room scale VR. So you can walk around a room, you can see your hands and your feet, and everything's all tracked.
mm,
Whereas when we came out, Oculus, which was later bought by
yeah.
Meta, or bought by Facebook, they were using a Xbox controller while you're sitting down, and can really just move around with very unnatural ways, right? So for 2015, 16, 17, we were the market leader, industry leader, sales leader in that industry. And we were also the first ones to come out with standalone devices. I don't know if the six stop standalone devices, now they kind of the Meta Quest and so forth, they're selling a lot of units because they're subsidizing it. But we actually were the first to innovate with that, the first to innovate with um, wireless PC VR as well. And now we were also the first to innovate with these devices, these thin and light devices that look like glasses. These are a third the weight of the new Apple
So
devices
wait,
that are coming
that's
out.
a third the weight of the Apple Vision Pro.
Yes,
And
yes.
so
So
let me
this
see. Let me.
device is 200 grams,
Uh-huh.
and it does pretty much most of the things that the Apple device does,
Oh,
and it's also less than a third the price, right?
Taiwan's the leader in the AI world.
They're probably not a leader in AI, but they're definitely a leader in the
GPU
semiconductor
manufacturing. Yeah.
manufacturing. Yeah, GPU, CPU
Yeah,
manufacturing, and
that's the hardware that's utilized to create all the AI. So let's be honest, who's really
exactly.
calling the shots? So are you saying that there's going to be a resurgence in the VR arena?
I think what's happening now is that the technology has been really advancing. And I first started using these
Mm,
things 33 years ago
mm,
when they were 2.5 kilograms. They were like 6 pounds on your head,
yeah.
right? Now it's 200 grams. So this is just, essentially one tenth the weight, or less than one tenth the weight. um, and the devices plus the workstation I worked on, it was $300,000 or $400,000. Now it's for a few $100s you can get these, probably a better performing device
What's
than
the
we had
price of that
back then.
of that when you have them?
This is about $1,000. So
And
you know,
is it going
it
to drop even further as
yeah, I mean,
that's how it
with
works, right?
all hardware technology, the price essentially every year it goes,
Down.
the performance goes down, the price goes down.
Yeah.
So, the
Performance goes
performance goes
up
up,
and the
and the
price goes
price
down. Yeah.
goes
Hmm. Yeah.
and the price goes
Yeah.
down. So it's something that technology has been doing for hundreds of years, is that we keep getting better and better things for less and less
Yeah.
money, right? So I'm very optimistic in terms of where these devices are going. We will be getting to more glasses form factors in the next 2, 3, 4 years,
Mm,
and they will allow us to have that essentially all day wear experience. So we're connected to the internet, we're connected to AIs whenever we want to, making all of us a lot smarter, right? In the sense of, when you go out today and you don't bring your phone, you feel kind of
yep.
naked, you feel
Hmm.
disconnected.
Hmm.
And in 3, 4 years, when you go out without your smart glasses that has VR AR capabilities, you are going to feel very
Yeah.
naked, probably more so
Yeah.
than you do today.
And then after
Because
that, it's implantables.
well, I know that's what people talk about, but
What do
I
you
think we're
think
actually
from
very
your
far
vantage
away from
point?
that. And because I've invested in a number of BCI companies. I've studied a lot of these areas.
Mm.
I've talked to people who are in the field, and we are far away, a lot farther away than people expect for brain computer interface.
But with,
You look at what
and that's,
you look at what Neuralink just did,
yeah.
right? And essentially, what they have done right now is what's been available with the Utah array for 15, 20 years,
Mm.
right? They have not made any new breakthrough in terms of what the capabilities of EEG signals, of putting implants, of invasive invasive computer interfaces.
Mm.
Because what they've done right now is they allow you to move a mouse on a screen.
Right.
They were able to do that 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago, with implants from other manufacturers. The thing that they have done well is that they've made it a lot smaller,
Mm.
right? But it's still limited to just the mechanical portion of your brain. So all it can do is allow you to move a mouse, or to pick left or right. It's the level of fidelity or granularity of that is nowhere near what is being promised to say we will give you a high bandwidth, pipe to computers. We are not anywhere near there. Right. And the devices that are in there today, they essentially, once you put these little pins in your head, after a year, your body sees it as a external intrusion, and it will put a wrap a plaque around it to keep it from working. So you actually have to replace it
Wow.
every
Interesting.
year to 2 years. It's something that makes sense if you're a quadriplegic.
Yes.
You don't have any other
Yes.
choice.
Yes. Yes.
You want to be able to communicate with people when you have no hands and no ability to talk.
Yeah.
That makes absolute sense. But for the average person, for a healthy human,
Yeah.
there's no reason
Do that
today or anywhere in the near future to put these chips
into your
into
brain.
your head,
I
right?
don't mind sensors placed in, like, say, on the forehead or in
Yeah.
different parts of the body, but implants, that's just a little much.
Yeah, and some people will blow it up in a sense of, look, they're already putting this into humans. It's gonna tomorrow we're gonna be putting it into everybody. It is not true,
Mm.
and they don't tell you the fact that technology has been around for over a decade, and it has not progressed beyond that, even with the hundreds of millions of dollars that Musk is putting in there. At some point, probably 10, 20, 30 years, I think there's high potential for this, but not in the near term.
All right, let's dive in because we want to get to the meat of this. Let's start with the
Yes.
basic questions and then let's go into this could go, like we say, as you've written in the book, in two directions. There's the positive and there's the negative. There's probably end up, it's just a combination of both. It's not utopia or dystopia, it's some sort of amalgam. And I think it's our job to ensure that whatever is created or built works well for humanity at large.
I want to introduce
Mhm.
another term, which is protopia,
I
something that
Kevin Kelly's.
Kevin Kelly
Mhm.
talked
Yeah.
about. Yeah, and I think that's the direction we should be thinking
Mm.
about, not really extreme, because we can never get to extremes,
Right.
right? So as long as we are doing something today that makes tomorrow better than today,
Yeah.
we are heading in the right direction, and you're going to asymptotically get to a better place. And accept that in the middle, things are not going to be perfect. There will be some level of
Yeah.
inequality. There will be some people left behind for some period of time. But overall, we are moving forward, right?
Well, look, I mean, I like Kevin Kelly's position. I think he's a little too optimistic because I think in that generation, they go in two directions. They're like, technology is all bad, or, oh, technology is amazing. It's the most incredible thing that's ever happened, blah, blah. And it is potentially. But we also have to factor in human behavior and power and
Yes,
what
yes.
we
Hmm.
allow this technology to do and who controls the technology. It all comes down to who runs the technology, and this is the experience we've had over the last 2 decades with corporate networks, how they have co-opted the free protocols of the internet and utilized it to make trillions of dollars and control and essentially control the discourse and dialogue that humans engage with. And as we move from 5 billion to 7 billion to all of humanity being online in some form, who controls what will, so in very many ways, weigh the direction we go forward in. I wouldn't be too optimistic. And because if you think from a historical perspective, we know there have
Yeah.
been dark
So
ages. There have been dark ages. There have been ages when humanity has gone backward. And I think we have to be vigilant because
yeah,
we
I
can go
think I
backward.
actually agree with you. I agree with you completely, which is why we gave both sides that
Yeah.
of that argument to show that, hey, this is how bad it could get, so that you have a choice to get there, actually physically get there, or you have a choice to do a mental exercise of getting there and then changing your mind because you want to avoid getting there.
Yeah.
Right now, I actually do agree with you that we probably, because of human nature, we will need to actually have some crisis before the world wakes up, or before people are able to I guess to fight the natural tendencies of society, or of power structures. That something bad has to
of
happen.
humans, on the other hand, to inertia, to just sort of sit around and sit on the sidelines
Yeah.
and not engage. I believe for us to have this good protopia, a good future, for this
Yes.
momentum and this
Mhm.
trajectory to be a positive one, we need more people involved in the conversation and the dialogue and engage with technology. We cannot leave it not just for a handful of corporate networks to control the world. I'm not even talking about big tech.
Yeah.
I'm talking about who are the
Mhm.
technologists. We need technologists from all walks of life. And the purpose of this
Yes.
podcast is to wake people up and say, get involved in the conversation. The future is being decided as we speak. And if you're not a part of it, what the hell are you letting those other people create for you? And so I think that it's
I can't
essential
agree. I can't agree more. Yeah.
that
In
we,
fact, at the end of the book, there is a specific section that says, if you are a policymaker, here are 10 things you need to think about. If you are a leader in the AI industry, here's 10 things you need to think about. If you are a technology corporate leader, here are things that you need to think about. And if you're a parent, here are things that you need to think about. And if you are a student right now, here are 10 things you need to think about. And if you are an AI agent that is now, scanning this book
yeah,
to try to find out how people think,
yeah,
here are 10 things
I
you should
love
think
it.
about.
I love it. I
Right.
love it.
So I think we are completely aligned
Yeah,
that, if you just leave it on its natural path, it actually will tend towards the negative more than it will tend towards the positive. I
100%.
mean, long term it will come back.
Yes.
Long term it will come
Well,
back, but
long
it,
term,
it
it
could
comes
go
back
south for a long
because
time.
when bad things happen, people wake up and say, no, I want something better. But we don't have to go
Yes.
that
And
deep into the dark. We live long enough as a civilization to
exactly.
understand what's going to happen. And enough of us are smart enough to say, we can lead this in the right way. So
Yeah.
we're on the same page. Let's get
Yes.
into the nitty gritty. And starting at the very basics, what is the metaverse exactly? How will people access it? And and is it really going to happen?
I'm sure you've heard all these things that metaverse is dead, or VR is dead, or whatever, right? And I think that the people who say that, they really just don't understand what it involves, right? At the end of the day, we as humans have evolved over the last 5 million years, 6 million years or so, to live in a 3D world, right? We are optimized. Our senses are optimized for a 3D spatial world, and that is what makes us feel the most natural. Now, we over the last few decades have forced ourselves to use a 2D screen to communicate, to interact, to create, because we didn't have the processing power and capabilities, and the artificial intelligence to support having a natural 3D interface. We are now getting to a point where not only is it possible, but it will become the most efficient way for us to interact with each other and with machines.
Sorry to jump in here. They were building the iPhone, and then Jobs says something, or the thumbs will learn, or something like that. And so we've been
Mhm.
acculturated and adapted to this 2D sort of world that's not really efficient. And you're saying that as digital technology progresses, it's naturally going to progress into this 3D spatial.
If you think about how has technology moved our medium, right?
Mm.
We started with print, and it was a essentially one dimensional text thing, right? And then we got to radio, which is one dimensional moving waveform that gave us audio. Then we went to essentially TV, which was a two-dimensional moving, first black and white, then color.
Mm.
And then we went into gaming, and it's kind of 2.5D
Mm.
experiences, right? And interactive. Now you can actually affect the content instead of just consuming the content. And so now we get into 3D worlds where it is full 3D, full immersive, and fully interactive. Right. Now, one of the other parts of your question earlier is that you're saying, how will people consume this? So initially, I think most people actually will still use 2D screens to consume this 3D content because we don't yet have enough of these devices around. But in the next 5 to 10 years, we will see that same transition that happened with phones, where it took about 5 years, but after that, everybody had a smartphone. And we are now spending a lot more time on our smartphones than we do on our computers, than we do on. And for the young generation, they don't even watch TV anymore. They just do everything on their screens, on their little screens, right? Pretty soon, we're going to do everything on something on your head, right? So essentially, the internet that we've been building for the last 30, 40 years, that internet has been a 2D internet. We are now moving into a
Yes.
3D
Yes.
internet. That's the simple way to think about it.
Yes.
We will consume it initially with 2D screens.
Yes.
We will later on consume it with 3D
Yes.
screens on our
Yes.
face or on our head.
Makes
Right. So
it's
that's the simple way to answer it. And I think it's a natural
progression.
trend that is not only possible, but it is actually
Inevitable.
inevitable
And
that
and
will
I
happen.
think that when you explain it that way, people see the inevitability of it because it's already done. It just hasn't been realized yet in the physical.
Yeah. Well, I mean, was this the sci-fi author was saying, what was it? Uh, the future is already created. It's just not evenly
Yeah.
distributed, right? And we are definitely, William Gibson said that, right? And so we are definitely, seeing that in certain parts of the
Mm.
world. And you see all the vision bros going around, and I mean, it's more for clout, I know,
Yeah.
but that's where it doesn't make sense when you have a pound and a half device on your head, but when you have a 30-40 gram device on your head, that type of a living
Yeah.
model will be a lot more efficient, right? If somebody else has it and they're going around, they know all this information that is supplemented into their
Yeah.
views, into their ears, and you don't have it,
You're
you're
at a
going to fall
loss.
behind.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
always how it
So
that's
so
always how it is. That's what propels adoption is with you're social beings. You interact with someone. They have access to all of this stuff. You're like, I need to know that too. I better get those things, whatever they are. It doesn't matter what they are. So we've agreed. The metaverse is happening and it's inevitable. But in this book, you wrote Our Next Reality, how the AI powered metaverse will reshape the world. Tell us about
yes.
the role of AI in these immersive 3D worlds. Like what happens now that we have not just large language models, but all of the things that these multimodal
Yeah. So
AI.
the last couple of years, AI has been on the forefront
Yeah,
of
everybody
media
top of mind.
coverage, but
Everybody.
really
Yeah.
AI has been around for 60
Yeah,
years, right?
exactly.
Both AI and VR technology were first invented in the
Yeah.
1950s. Right. So people were building these solutions then, and they've had different versions of AI.
Right.
Now, initially it was more, expert systems or programmatic, and then the last 10, 15 years have become more machine
Yeah.
learning. And then the last 2 years, because of
ChatGPT.
ChatGPT making that much more visible and
Yeah.
accessible, it's now in people's kind of the forethought. Now, the thing to realize is that almost every part of what makes a virtual world possible, from our tracking to the content generation to the virtual avatars to the world generation to the 3D engines, all of that is AI, right? So everything that makes these experiences possible is AI
Mm.
driven. That's why we say AI powered.
Mm.
Now, the one of the biggest reasons why these devices haven't taken off is that it takes so much work to make good 3D content,
Mm.
because you have to build these virtual worlds and the 3D models and then the interaction with each one, and you're using these tools that takes hours and hours to make a small object.
Mm.
So it's tens of millions of dollars to make a quality AAA content. What we will get to now is that we are getting to somebody saying something,
Yeah.
and then it becomes a virtual
Yeah.
world, and then now you can go play in
Yeah.
it. Or I can say, hey, here's my favorite sci-fi novel. I stick it in this engine. I say, can you make a game that looks like this sci-fi
Yeah.
novel? And I want to be the hero,
Yeah.
and my buddy here can be the heroine or whatever,
Yeah.
right? And we want to go and live this world instead of just read this world. I think when we get to there, and we're not that far, as you know, last week or
Sora.
2 weeks ago, we had the Sora
Yeah.
announcement that is doing that with
Yeah.
videos. And then now people are actually taking those videos and then using 3D tools to turn them into 3D
Yeah.
meshes, which then you can then load into a game engine,
Yep.
right? So all of this, the workflow is completely being
Transform.
changed.
Hmm.
And we will, very soon. I mean, not soon, but let's say in a 2 to 5 year period,
Hmm.
we will have the ability for anybody in this world to become a content creator. So, we essentially the smartphone turned anybody into a video content
Mm-hmm.
creator, because all you have to have a phone and you can make a TikTok
Yeah.
and you can become a celebrity,
Yeah.
right? With this new world, anybody that has access to the internet, or even maybe not even, you may not even need the internet for some of these services,
Yeah.
because you could have edge-based processing.
Yeah.
You can create content that will make you want to put on this headset and be able to learn from it, to experience something from it, to be able to collaborate in it, right? And in a way that is a lot more natural than we've ever had before.
Where do you see this taking us in terms of art, culture, media, the current forms of
Yeah.
entertainment, how those things are created?
Yeah, if you look at the current model, in terms of art and culture
Mm-hmm.
and whatever, a lot of it's being controlled by the big studios, or the music studios, or the agents, on the art side, who they're promoting, right? You're putting your power as a creator in the hands of other people. Right. And if you're a great scriptwriter, if you don't have a studio to spend hundreds of millions of dollars building and promoting a movie, you're not going to get it out. Right. We're going to get to a point where if you've made a good story, you can make a movie, in a matter of minutes or hours, instead of hundreds of millions of dollars and years to get that content out. So you bring the power back to the people who are really the creative class. So I think it's actually for a lot of your audience who are afraid of AI, they should be embracing AI. They should think, here's my way to be liberated from the shackles of the studio system, that has made me just a cog before. Now I'm the one that came up with that story. I want to be able to realize that story. I have the best vision of it, instead of them hiring some famous director who then is being influenced by who the funders are and so forth to change my story. Right? So from a as you know, both my parents are artists, so I have a special place in my heart
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
art and culture.
Yeah.
And this also allows us to have a ability to transfer information and culture beyond the pure Hollywood system. Right now, the biggest export out of the U.S. is not devices, or it's not food or oil. It's
Culture.
culture.
Yeah.
It's music. It's stories. It's movies. It's Netflix series, whatever. Right. And so if now we have actually anybody in the world can create this content, we have a lot more representative culture versus a US directed culture, right?
I
Because we want everybody in the world to be able to be represented equally. If you look at how much content on the internet today, it's 80% in English.
yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
it is not representative of the population distribution.
There's the positive potential. This could happen, what you just talked about. And I see that on the way to that future, the disruption is very negative for people who participate in the current system, in the existing system. But I also see where this thing goes completely wrong. And we don't exactly get that outcome. We get another outcome with another set of overlords, not the studio system, not the big time producers, production houses, not the big time agencies, the big players in that world. They get superseded or replaced by the big tech overlords who now own the metaverse and everything in it, and not just the money from the production, but every single thing you do in this world, all the data, all of your sensory behavior, all of your emotions, not just what you create in the metaverse, the avatars you create in the metaverse, the stories you create in the metaverse, but your very reality, your sensory reality and experience, all the data of your behavior in that space could well be owned by a few companies. So so I want to talk about that. I want to talk about who owns the metaverse, privacy, identity, security.
As you know, we actually have a specific chapter about this, and about the concern over security, the concern over manipulation by a bigger system, right? And I think this is where we actually need to have policymakers step in and take a bigger role,
But
right?
they
Not in the ways
but they
of
don't.
reducing innovation.
No, but
Well, they
they can no. Let's be clear. They're so far behind And as the technology, exponential technology, the rate at which the change is happening, they're so far behind.
Yes.
They don't know what's going on.
I know.
I was watching this Senate hearing with the top AI leaders, and it was such a joke because they didn't even know what to ask.
I completely agree
So
with you.
it
Yeah.
doesn't make
Well,
any
that
sense. We cannot expect regulatory, legislative, and regulatory frameworks to really be the reason that we have the right infrastructure in place for a future that
well,
works for people. The big
yeah.
tech's going to run it. There'll be regulatory capture, and big tech's going to be like, "Yeah, we're running this net. Now we have another show to run."
I completely agree with you in terms of where we are today.
Yeah.
But I guess my position is that we have to try, right? If we don't try, if we don't try to educate that group, then we will end up with the kind of dystopian future that you're talking about, the control by the technology overlords, because they there needs to be somebody else putting the voice out of the voice of clarity, right? And again, this is the main reason I wrote this book, because I wanted to give that voice, to allow somebody to take it in a simple way, to allow these policymakers to read something, right? That is digestible, that is unbiased or less biased, right? I mean, there's always bias of at least me and my author, but at least we're biased in our ways, that we are both giving both sides of it,
Yeah, it's
right?
brilliant. I'm one of those people who's come to believe that we need technology that itself is decentralized and transparent and can afford privacy. So it has to come at the tech infrastructure level. Let's get on to the positive side of this. One of the exciting things about immersive worlds and virtual reality and this kind of new technology, which you know so well, it can transform health and medicine. It can
Mhm.
transform education in the most incredible way. Tell us about that, the positive value of these technologies.
The good news is, actually, I've been thinking about this for over 30 something years.
Mhm.
When I first studied VR, my research paper was, how do we take immersive technologies and disrupt education,
Mm.
right? And the more I look at this, and over the last, and unfortunately, the conclusion of my paper was, in the next 10 years, everybody will be using this. It's going to be amazing. Our education system is going to be totally disrupted. I was a few decades off,
Uh,
right? So, but I talked to educators all over the world,
mm,
and I'm seeing that they are now being open to this message.
mm,
I'm seeing, not just about 3 4 weeks ago, I was in Qatar
mm.
at the WISE conference. It's the largest education conference in the world,
Yeah,
and they are bringing educators to talk about how technology should be implemented, and people are trying to, write papers about, how do we change the pedagogy, how do we get people off of these old systems. And now with AI together with immersive tech, we actually have kind of a two-prong attack, where you allow full brain learning with immersive tech, which, as we all know, you remember like 10% of what you see, like 20% of what you hear, whatever, 50% of what you do, and then you learn more when you actually start teaching, right? So when you do these things, immersive tech allows you to use all of those senses. And you have something else that we didn't have before, which is, you are now soon able to have a personalized teacher tutor
yeah,
that is with you 24/7.
yeah,
The classes, like these classes I have right
yeah,
here, they actually have built-in AI, and they have a camera, they have microphones. Now, if I want to enable them, this one doesn't right now, but this if I want to enable a future version to have an always listening mode, and it can actually hear all my conversations and be able to guide me and be that patient, unbiased teacher, that tutor that sits on my shoulder.
yeah,
And there's been studies already over multiple decades
yeah,
that shows that one-to-one tutoring is multiple orders of magnitude. Actually, probably I would say is a standard deviation, two standard deviations plus,
mm,
in terms of improving quality of learning,
mm.
when you have one-to-one versus a large class,
Wow.
right?
Yeah,
And this is one-to-one,
yeah,
but then it's one-to-one from a all-knowing teacher
yeah,
that knows everything about history and math and science and all the things that no single human can actually do
yeah,
today. We are now making that available to anybody can afford, $100 piece of hardware.
yeah.
I think that's where it's going to be super amazing in terms of elevating the quality of knowledge of humans in general.
Yeah.
Right, and that will actually get across the issue that you had earlier. Is all of these policymakers are not educated, they're not up to date, so forth. But now if we can put these glasses on them and they can turn them into really smart people, no matter what their age is,
I love it.
that is I think that gives me hope, right?
I love it.
So
That's so
technology may be what helps bring itself into this positive cycle.
that's perfect. Go to the Senate hearing. We plop the device on their heads. We're like, use this and learn,
Yeah.
understand what we're talking about. Okay, you in the book you talk about why immersive education is better, it's superior. Uh, how we are more stimulated. There's more blood flow to the brain. We're learning in orders of magnitude
Hmm.
more. But you also have this
Hmm.
lovely chart. It's called How Schools Can Be Reimagined. You have a today and you have a
Yes.
future, a fixed curriculum versus a bespoke curriculum. Can you think of it? The system of sitting 30 kids in a classroom and
Hmm.
they're all going to sort of learn blah, blah, blah.
Always learning to the lowest common denominator today,
Yeah.
and it doesn't make
It doesn't
sense.
make any
Yeah, I
sense.
mean, you're limiting people.
You're
No.
limiting, you're not giving ones who needed information a particular way, the way that they need to learn. They're sitting there. Sitting is a terrible way to learn. Um, you talk about rewards raw work, current schools, and then future schools, and a VR immersive school breeds curiosity and creativity. Current schools are test driven. VR schools builds critical thinking. Current school focuses on individual performance. A VR school, immersive school, develops collaboration. We need this now. If we think about it, one of the biggest problems we face as a globe is we have these exponential technologies that are sort of just avalanching upon us,
Mhm.
transforming
Yes.
everything. We know, we think we know, rewriting the past because so much of what we know to be true is a version of history that was determined or written by the conquerors. So it's very biased.
Yes.
Everything's changed. Everything's changed. What we think we knew, what we believe, all gone. And nobody's ready
Mhm.
and nobody's up to speed. And that's a big problem. But if we have this technology, people can catch up super, super fast. So I think this needs to be implemented now.
Last week, I was talking to a VC friend, and he was saying, "So, if you're going to start a company, what would you do?" And I said, "I would probably start a immersive AI university,
Yes.
so that you bring all of the things that you just talked about
Yes.
with the technology that's happening
Yes.
today, and you can take high quality education, stop making it limited to a few thousand people that can go to Ivy League
Yes.
schools every year. I mean,
Yes.
you need that information and that knowledge to be as
It's
democratized as possible.
possible.
Uh,
Okay, so we like that. So some of the big questions I think people would have listening to this kind of conversation is, okay, so are we going to end up with a world where everybody's just sort of online all the time? Well, yeah. I mean, they're already online all the time. It's 7 hours a day. We're on the internet. And now with this, in these immersive worlds, are we going to have a scenario where people are just not really engaged with the physical world? And what's that going to do for the human condition?
yeah, so that is probably one of the things that worries how this technology will ultimately evolve. Um, Although I would have to say that my screen time is probably over 10 hours a day, and I think the average human right now is actually somewhere over 10 to 12 hours a day. We will essentially have all our waking hours with a screen in front of our face, because just like I assume you wear your glasses most of the day.
Mm,
Pretty much from the time you wake up to the time you go to bed, you're
mm.
going to have glasses on, and that allows you to do two things. One is that it allows you to have that information that will feed you what makes you what will bring value to you, but it could also distract you, and particularly in an immersive experience. Now, I think for us who live in the first world, and we see being put into another world as a negative because you're not present.
Mm.
But for a lot of people in the world, unfortunately, their world may just be a bunk bed in the dorm somewhere, or they're in a factory
Yeah.
dorm that they spend most time working, and then they go
Yeah,
go back to their little
yeah.
bunk, and that's all they have. And so being able to travel virtually in these classes, to go to another place, to see another world, to them there's benefit, right? There's value,
Ah.
whether it's to educate or to relax or to communicate. Um, I wouldn't see being immersed in a not local world always as a negative, right? For some people, it now, the other benefit is I think we will be getting to devices that can easily switch between the two. So instead of now, we're spending 7 hours a day looking at our phone in our hands with our head bent down, not being present. Now we can actually be looking up, and it only gives us the information that we need to cover when we need it, so that we actually have a better way to communicate with people in front of us or around us. So there's definitely a trade off. I don't think we have a perfect solution yet. um, but the other thing is that hopefully you also have an AI system that is monitoring your health, knowing how much stress you're in. It'll put you into the right mode or right music when you're stressed out, or give you information to allow you to always know where you're going. Like before this meeting, if I had an AI agent or an assistant that said, "Hey, you went to the wrong link. You should use this link that was just sent to you yesterday," I could have reduced some stress for me, right? So I don't know if it's a net negative to have a screen in front of us all the time.
I see, again, people tend to abuse these things. So I'm thinking that
Hmm.
already I've seen in the last 10 years sort of a splitting of our society. We know that.
Hmm.
That's algorithmic driven content online designed to outrage and silo people
Hmm.
and all of that. We understand that. But the
Yes.
reaction is for people are just sort of very isolated. A lot of them, they don't have young people, they don't have friends, they don't have relationships. A large percentage of young men who have not even one friend, and young women as well. And so we see this happening. And my concern is people ending up just living in an online world, which can be satisfying in emotional ways, but we still have a physical body. We still have to procreate. We still have the things we need to do physically. And so my
Yes.
concern is that there are always going to be people who transcend and are above the systems or run the systems. And then there are going to be people who are at the top of the pile. But I could see a large percentage of humanity just being users. And my concern is this is not necessarily a healthy way to use technology for the sustenance of our body.
So I actually discussed this specifically in the book because based on our studies, we found that immersive social experiences are actually twice as addictive as current 2D
Mm-hmm.
social experiences. And so it actually forces us to confront the issue that how do we keep that from being a long-term negative.
Mm.
And what we did find is that if there are three ways to essentially mitigate some of these issues.
Mm.
One is to give them a reminder in the beginning when they put on, like, don't use it more than X hours a day, which actually works better with females and with older adults,
Right.
but doesn't work too good with young kids.
Right.
Um, and then there's the kind of every hour or so remind them that says maybe you should take a break or whatever. And then there's the kind of third more extreme model is after 2 hours it forces you to take a break. The system actually shuts down and essentially allows you to go and spend time outside, right? So what we found was that for the majority of people, actually the second model worked fine. That if you just kept reminding them, uh, they'll get bugged enough that say, okay, yeah, you're right, I
Okay.
should go take a break. But for some, particularly young males, the third model was actually the most effective.
Mm.
That essentially just says after 2 hours, 3 hours,
Shut it
we
down.
shut you down, go take a half-hour break before you can restart again. And initially there was a lot of negative sentiment from those users, say, hey, well, don't control me. But what we found was after about 10, 20 days, the acceptance became fine. They were okay with that model. So what that tells us is that if we wanted to, either the system providers or the network providers or the platform providers can install these type of kind of safeguards to help maintain some level of balance between virtual and physical world usage. So I think there are definitely ways that we can get around it. I don't know if every um, every platform will be self-motivated enough to do these things. But this is where maybe there needs to be some regulation at some point. And again, like you're saying, it probably requires some bad things to happen to a few
Sure.
people before people wake up and
Sure.
say, hey, we should probably look into this.
Many of us have a fear and aversion to the new things, new technologies that disrupt, just sort of shake us up and make us have to change. But humans adapt. This is what we do. We do really, really well. And we can adapt. We can learn how to manage these technologies. We can learn how to be masters of this new technology and not just victims of it. And all of this is part of the process. Even having these conversations, you writing this book, us pushing back against big tech. I mean, a lot of these things are part of the process of humanity moving forward and adapting to this whole new layer of possibility in the world. It's interesting because if you think about it, for as long as humans have existed, we have had to transcend nature and the forces of nature. Not doing so well right now. But now we have this whole new force that has entered the game, and that's digital technology and all the things that these things can do. And now we have to adapt and adjust. And yeah, for a while we may feel like, oh my God, we're failing. But the great thing about humans is we can change, we can grow, we can adapt. We're not inanimate objects. And I think if AI is here, we can rise above it. I don't agree with the whole, by the way, super intelligence conversation at all. Not even. I think the AI machine, as a machine, can have more information than the human, but the human is always smarter.
Yeah, I think it really depends on how you define intelligence,
Mm.
but at least based on current limitations of our body, we whether you're talking about calculating information,
Mm.
or playing chess or go, or creating protein folding, there's just things that humans are not able to do when you start looking at the scales that
Sure.
computers and systems can do, and the speeds that they work
Sure,
at. I
sure,
mean,
sure.
our signals in our brains go about 100 meters per second,
Right.
right? These devices are going at the speed of light. We're working,
Yeah.
maybe 8 hours a day and probably 2 hours productive days per day. They're going 24 hours a day. So there're just a lot of things that I don't think we need to compete with them on pure raw calculations or
Exactly.
intelligence.
Yeah.
But there's definitely, I agree with you in terms of the human aspect, the emotional aspect, the compassion aspect. Those are things that is unclear whether or not digital intelligence will be able to surpass us in that kind of area in terms of communicating, right? Like what you're doing right now.
Mm.
There's something about a human to human interaction that appeals to us, that allows us to grasp the information more. If I just saw a avatar robot talk to me, I probably wouldn't be too connected to that
Right.
person.
Exactly.
So in terms of raw intelligence, I think it's hard for us to compete on raw intelligence. But in emotional intelligence, there may be something that we can still fight with machines on for some time. This kind of goes to where we should be thinking about for our next generation of kids, right? What should we be having them learn these days? If you look at yesterday, a news just came out with Jensen Wong, or 2 days, 3 days ago. He says, "Oh, you don't need to teach your kids coding anymore, because the new programming language is just natural voice." I think there's a lot of truth to what he's saying, but I think what he's probably missing is that it's important also to understand, when you learn coding, you learn logic,
Yeah.
you learn procedures, you learn the give and take of when things
Yeah.
happen, and you know so we need to actually teach our kids a much broader scope of information.
100%.
No, coding and STEM is good.
Yeah.
It's not the only thing.
Right.
So I think he said part of the answer,
Yeah.
but he didn't give the full
Yeah.
answer, which is, we need to start teaching people ethics. We need to start teaching people history.
Yeah.
We need to start teaching people more psychology and music and art, things that were the non-STEM stuff people used to undervalue,
100%.
will be increasingly valuable
100%.
when the basic calculations and engineering tasks can be done
By a
by
computer.
AI.
Well, it's interesting how AI has initially disrupted coding itself, but I think that it's you still want to be a programmer. Maybe you're not going to be a straight coder, but you're going to be a programmer. You're going to think about systems. You're going to think about how to utilize this intelligence to create something
Hmm.
that serves a human or humans. And so you still have to
Hmm.
think, understand coding, know how to use it, but maybe you're not going to do it all day long. Oh,
And you're not going to do it with the same tools that we used to, where
I-
you're using a text editor to edit code and then go through these compilers and everything.
yeah,
We don't need to do that,
right.
but we need to understand how does a machine work?
Yeah,
How does it think?
100
How does it
exactly.
take the information I'm giving it,
Absolutely.
right? Because otherwise, if you give the wrong instructions, it may sound like you did something, but it's being misinterpreted
Yes,
because of the way that you phrased it,
exactly.
right? So those kind of things you have to understand.
One of the other things you cover in the book, which I think was really, really interesting, the other area where these new technologies are going to be absolutely vital, health and medicine and research.
Yeah.
Talk about that a little.
This is actually one of the areas where there's very little debate, is that having both AI and XR being applied to various areas of healthcare, and particularly I think in the mental health
Right.
side, with immersive tech, where I was talking to the folks at the VA. Veteran Association, and they have hundreds of thousands of veterans that come back and they have post-traumatic stress, or they have just issues in terms of suicidal thoughts and so forth. And when they put them into these devices, and then they have these AI coaches that help train them and communicate with them, and then brings them back into the different scenarios that they were in, so they can gradually move out of it in a way that is desensitizing them. So I think there's a lot of value there, right? I mean, the first use of AI was actually Eliza, or one of the first uses, which was a AI psychologist, right? So
Therapy
so it's
chatbot.
kind of
Yeah.
going. It's quite ironically,
Yeah.
or appropriate, that we're starting to use it again for mental health,
Mm,
for using immersive tech for relaxation and stress
yeah.
relief, using it for pain relief, distraction therapy, using it for when people have they lose their limbs, and they need to be able to reconnect, or readjust their nervous system
Yeah.
to be able to get rid of paralyzation, or get rid of chronic pain.
Phantom pain.
There's
Yeah.
so many things that are proven to actually work, right? And for surgery, one of the examples I had in the book was one of the actually the preeminent surgeon for conjoined twins, and he only does head conjoined twins. So your brains are conjoined.
Mm,
How do you separate it?
mm,
You have to first do these scans, very detailed scans,
mm,
in using CAT scans, or other type of technologies, and then you put it into a 3D model, and you plan out the surgery
mm,
ahead of time. And a lot of times he's doing it across national borders,
mm,
so that if you didn't have this technology, there's just no way to get these things done.
mm,
So it's just amazing to see the types of use cases that are being used for healthcare.
mm.
And I think we're going to find even more going forward. And you talked earlier about the BCI and Neuralink and so forth. I think for those quadriplegic types, this type of technology will be a
Yeah.
godsend to allow them to communicate, that they before were completely locked
No,
in.
no question. So the next chapter for humanity, here's what I want to do. I want to walk through some things, and then I want you to tell us when that's going to happen. 2030, 2040, 2050. Just we're just having fun. And these are all things that you've talked about in your talks or in the book. So 3D
Yeah.
content becomes the norm. First of all, explain what that
Um,
is, and then tell us when you think that's going to happen.
Well, I mean, right now we're for the people who are in, let's say, gaming, or people who are using Roblox or whatever, they're already experiencing 3D content.
Mm-hmm.
There's already actually probably close to a billion people every day using that type of technology. Now, we will be getting to more 3D content for the other 6-7 billion people probably in the next 5 to 10 years.
Okay.
It's going to take some time,
So
but the
2030.
good news is that I think by 2030, most of this will happen. We will be able to have that metaverse be realized,
Okay.
right? And I would think that by that time, more than half of the people will be using head-worn devices to enter it, versus using computers or phones to utilize it.
Okay. And so I guess that covers the other two. So metaverse content will primarily be AI generated and populated by AI. Is that also by
Yeah,
2030? That's happening
that will
now.
happen even faster.
So
Yeah, I
as it's
mean,
being built, that's what's going to be used.
that's what will enable it,
Yeah.
is the fact that, because otherwise, if you leave it for humans to do it, it would
Take
take
too long.
forever,
Okay.
right? Yeah.
XR devices will supersede smartphones again by 2027, 2030.
Um,
What are you looking at?
I think it'll be, yeah, by the end of this decade, all
Mm.
of those things will happen.
The metaverse will be the biggest employer on earth.
That's something that we need to think about, even the concept of employment, right? Right now, if you look at online worlds, I mean, there are, like, Facebook has 3 billion users, right? So in some sense, it's already the biggest country in the world if you think of it as
It's
one group of
true.
people as a country,
That is
right?
true.
So we will, once we get this metaverse, it actually will, I think, supersede these private vertical social networks, right? It will essentially interconnect them, and then you can jump between these networks as you wish with your personal avatar or your personal
Well,
identity and your personal wealth.
depending on how it's constructed. I mean, depends on they could build
Yeah. So,
their little walled worlds, and
well,
not it's not interoperable at
if we
all.
if we learn from history a little bit, right? I mean, back when the internet first started, I don't know if you remember Prodigy and CompuServe and
Hmm.
American
Yep.
Online,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
I mean, they were all vertical wall gardens that were calling themselves the
The
internet,
internet.
and over the decades, they disappeared, right? Because the value of a network is the square of its nodes, right? That's Metcalfe's law. Now, if you have an open system, you're going to have more users in there. And the more users in there will create more value. And it will start to
Well,
extract
tell that
vertical
to big
users.
tech. They're definitely going in the other direction right now. They're blocking interoperability. You can't post links because they want to own all the data. They want to make sure that other tech giants can't steal their data.
I mean, that was the same thing that the CompuServe and AOLs did, right? I mean, I'm sure when you used it, you only had so
Yeah.
many buttons. But after a while, when wait, let's say if we start moving from these proprietary networks to a WebXR model, and the WebXR model essentially turns every single website into a 3D world, right? And so you can, if I can do that, why do I even need to go to this social network? Why do I need to post on this? I
Interesting.
can just post my virtual world, and people can come see it, the ones that I care about. I know it seems difficult today, especially with how powerful the big tech companies are, but in the long run, I think we have to look a longer term. I think the powers of the network will prevail.
Interesting. I love it. I'm all for that open, decentralized metaverse. I think that's how it has to be for it to
Yeah.
actually serve humanity. Waking time spent in the metaverse will exceed time spent in the real world. When's that going to happen?
Well, in the sense that we talked about earlier, where if the glasses that you have is your, essentially your
Okay.
doorway to the
So
metaverse,
then it's
you're wearing it,
all the time.
pretty much all
Yeah,
your
yeah,
waking time.
yeah. Okay.
Right now, this my phone, I'm spending somewhere like 8 hours a day on
Yeah,
this
yeah.
phone, looking at the phone.
Yeah, it's true.
So if it's on my eyes, for it to be 16 hours a day,
It's going to be
I think
16
it's a
hours a
very
day. As
natural
long
thing.
as you're not sleeping, you're going to have it on.
There's no reason to pick something out of your pocket
Yeah.
after that.
So
Yep.
the last one is the AI powered virtual economy will enable a more egalitarian society. I think that's a highly far fetched
Yes.
notion, but go for it.
So let me kind of tell you how I see this playing out, right? If you look at the working hours of the world versus their productivity in terms of the income level, right? You see a very direct correlation in terms of the higher the productivity, the lower hours of work, right? Going from about 2,500 hours to about 1,000 hours per year for the average worker. And if we take that to the next level, where if we increase our productivity 5x, 10x, 100x over time with the help of AI and robotics, our need to work goes down to, let's say 10 hours a week or 2 hours a week. I know it's been talked about for a
Mm,
long time, but I think that the trends are actually
hmm.
clear, and we are finally getting to a point where we could probably get there. Now, the other thing that I when I did the study, I looked at kind of the income levels of people around the world and their happiness level. There's also a direct correlation with income and
Mm,
happiness or
mm.
satisfaction. And what we find is that the wealthy nations are not 1x or 2x more wealthy. They're probably 10 or 20x more wealthy. So if you as the lower income brackets go up by just a few $1,000s, they can dramatically increase their level of
Happiness.
happiness, right? So actually, once we increase productivity for the lower income groups to increase their value or wealth, is actually a pretty easy thing to happen, particularly if you're willing to do some minor redistribution. And by having a global interconnected metaverse, you actually allow that natural redistribution to happen in a way where you actually bring value to both sides, because anybody in a metaverse actually has the same I guess the same rights and the same capability to access the rest of the world. We're very fortunate now that we're living, in the US, where we're seen as the place that everybody wants to be. So just being born here gave us a lot
Advantage.
of advantages. But now if the metaverse allows
Yeah.
anybody with a device to connect to have that same level
You
of
don't need
advantage,
to.
it then equalizes.
100%.
It equalizes the world. So we don't need to. Everybody don't have to all migrate to the US to get these
100%.
advantages. So again, you just have to think a longer term. These things, I think, will naturally happen, but again, it won't be a straight line. It will definitely be some ups and downs, and before we get there. But I think the natural path of the of progress from technology will get us there in the long run.
What's one thing that
Yeah.
listeners can, think about in order to get ready for these new possibilities that are ahead?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, it's thinking beyond the present, right? Because too many of us look right now,
Immediate.
about what project I need to do, or where am I going next, or do I have money to do this, and really start thinking about how you, as an individual and as part of a group, can contribute to solving some of the issues that we've been talking about for the last hour,
100%.
right? Or at least not contribute to making it worse.
100%.
And maybe getting more people around you to start thinking longer
Yeah.
term, to start thinking broader. And when you start looking at changing your perspective, a lot of questions, the things that makes you afraid, actually become something that makes you more hopeful. And I think once we have hope, then we have the power to make those changes. So kind of take our head out of the sand a little bit, and really rise above the noise that's happening, because there is a lot of noise, and there's a lot of distraction. There's a lot of people with bias intentions of trying to get you to do something, and thinking about what you can do for yourself, for your family, for your society, and then take
Yeah.
action. I think those are the things that I would recommend. And reading more broadly, the more the more you can defend against the misinformation that will be coming. The more you will know for yourself what's right and wrong, or what you think could be right and wrong. At least not be overly influenced by one
I
perspective.
love it. Not be overly influenced by one perspective. That's brilliant. So the book is Our Next Reality, How the AI-Powered Metaverse Will Reshape the World, by Alvin Graylin and Louis Rosenberg. Is it out already, or is it coming out next week?
It's coming out on March 5th.
I think it's a mandatory reading if you want to be prepared for the inevitable future, and not just be prepared, but sort of take a leadership role in it, which is what I think people should be doing. Make sure to listen, follow, and subscribe for new episodes wherever you get your podcasts, and on our YouTube channel.